Now, several organizations have been involved in the packaging of food parcels as hunger intensifies due to the lockdown. Today, President Cyril Ramaphosa witnessed those packaging of parcels at the Johannesburg Central Food Bank in Booysens. At the same time, economists are warning that COVID-19, the pandemic, will exacerbate an already dire food shortage across several African countries. To discuss, we're joined on the line now by Wandile Sihlobo, who is economist at the Agricultural Business Chamber of South Africa. Wandile, thank you very much. How is South Africa looking, first of all, in terms of food security ourselves as we head sort of to a deepening crisis of COVID-19?
Good evening, Francis. In the South Africa side, at a national level, I think we are pretty much comfortable for at least the next 12 months. We are in a fortunate year whereby we have a second biggest grain production on record. We do have a bumper crop on a citrus side, and also just across all of the other commodities. So I would say we are comfortable. But obviously, we will still be importing a bit of rice. We will be importing wheat, palm oil, but there is nothing to worry about. But where we might have a challenge, Francis, is on the household food security side. And I think that the interventions that the government have made through the social grants as well as on the food parcels, those are some of the efforts to make sure that we assist people that are on that segment.
Yeah. All right. So overall, you say in terms of production, we're okay. So the lockdown hasn't exacerbated problems there at all. We've got the balance right in terms of protecting people and feeding people.
Yeah, I would say on balance, looking at the national level, we are okay in South Africa. But obviously, we are in a crisis situation. Not all of the agricultural subsectors are operating at the optimal level. But from a consumer perspective, nothing to worry about. But within the industry, there are some subsectors. Take, for example, wool. You take the wine industry that are feeling a bit of pain. But looking broadly, South Africa is in a relatively comfortable situation.
When it comes to the rest of Africa, though, you've painted a very tragic picture. I mean, there was already climate change, locusts in East Africa. We know conflicts in part of Africa. How is COVID-19 going to make things even worse, Wandile?
For the African continent, Francis, the COVID-19 adds already in a much more difficult situation there. Like you rightly mentioned it, in East Africa region, across the African Horn, there's been a lot of locusts there that have damaged agricultural sector. And in countries, take for example Kenya, they were coming in a season that was already preceded by the drought. So conditions are not well. In our neighboring country, Zimbabwe, we also expecting some dire situation there. Also, if you were to look in Mozambique, so the African continent broadly is not in good shape. And I think that the coronavirus will worsen the conditions. And I think in addition to this, we also have a challenge of fragile macroeconomic conditions. So even if now countries were to be importing some of the food supplies, I think that due to the weakness in their currencies, it's going to be proving to be much a difficult time this time around.
I mean, if we didn't produce food, we'd be in a very difficult situation because the rand is weak. And is it correct to say that some countries are even looking at their exports of food and putting restrictions on those to the detriment of African countries?
That's one of the key things, Francis, that has been worrying a lot. And I mean, it began to worry even us in South Africa, because you will appreciate that about all of the rice that we consume in South Africa, which is about 1 million tons a year, we're importing that. And about 90% of that is coming from Thailand as well as India. When India went to lockdown, it experienced some bit of a logistical issues, which they still are an issue. But fortunately, Thailand, things are still flowing. But Vietnam, which is one of the key rice producers, had placed export restrictions. And we also saw signs of that in the Black Sea. And all of those things were really some of the worries to say, if then there are these restrictions, what will they mean for importing countries like us?
So Africa in one situation, at the same time, farmers in America destroying food. How is that possible?
I mean, that just shows the imbalances that are there in the global food market. But on the American side, what has happened or structurally different in the U.S. than us is that the share of food that is consumed in a restaurant is much bigger than what is happening in the African market. Now, obviously, with the number of restaurants having been closed in the U.S., now farmers are faced with a surplus. and it ended up being destroyed. While in South Africa, though, somewhat of a similar situation, it might be existing in a beef industry, but fortunately we are not destroying, but the farmers that are supplying a lot of a restaurant are feeling a bit of a pinch in there. And obviously one is looking at all of these imbalances, but unfortunately on the African countries, it's really a dire situation.
When there's such a surplus in America, I mean, we could ask for help as Africa. But it's interesting that you say those previous efforts, when Africa was receiving food from America mainly, actually resulted in more dependence, and it's actually stopped the development of agriculture. Just explain that.
There are distortions in all of these things, because now if you're going to be getting food from the other countries, bringing on in a certain domestic market at prices that are far less or not really encouraging domestic production, that does have a problem. So I think we will seek assistance from outside as the African continent, but I think that we need to be careful on how to balance all of this. But for South Africa, we are fine.
What should everyone do? As you say, South Africa is fine with regards to the rest of the continent. What should the African Union be doing, for example?
The African Union, I think they should work closely with the World Food Programme, the World Bank, and all the other multinationals on ensuring that at least the African continent has the capital and the capacity to import what's needed. And any food aid that might be able to assist in the short term, I think that's something that needs to be explored.
All right. Thank you very much. That was economist Wandile Sihlobo from the Agricultural Business Chamber of South Africa. Now, the lifting of the current hard lockdown has been welcomed by the agricultural sector. As of May, all agricultural activities will resume as normal, including industries involving wine, wool, timber. FNB's Davi Maria says the phased lockdown is the most appropriate to prevent another hard lockdown in South Africa.